Someone says, if I'm not mistaken, from the factory, B9s target a lambda of 1.0 even under load. Can you explain how OEs and 034 employ a new age lambda strategy in these new ECUs for those who don't understand?
Almost all OEMs are migrating to or have already migrated to a 1.0 Lambda under
Yeah.
nearly all conditions. If you want to look, there's a really good episode on Engineering Explained on YouTube on some of the new Porsche motors who are doing Lambda of 1 in all conditions, like basically no other deviation from Lambda 1.0. And, there's the OEMs are doing it for a number of reasons. Generally, that's your most efficient and complete burn cycle or burn ratio. That's going to produce the best gas emissions out of the tailpipe. So that's their ultimate goal, is to try and run a 1.0 Lambda under all conditions. And then they're asking what play new age strategies. I mean, most of the strategies to be able to do that are in the technologies that control the motor and the design of the thermodynamic design of the combustion chambers themselves, and how the burn propagates through there, to be able to sustain that lambda ratio even under these much higher cylinder pressures. You take on like an old 80s motor and try and do that, and it would be knock
Yeah.
city
Yeah.
at way less power levels.
Yeah.
So it's just advancements across the board, both mechanical, flow, you know, uh, all the control systems around it, the injection events, the cams, the valves, every aspect of it is what's allowing these motors to run Lambda 1. And yeah, B9s run Lambda 1 as long as they can, and will not enrich it until you hit a certain exhaust gas temperature threshold. So yeah, it doesn't care about load necessarily for what Lambda it's running.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the key here is you can run a 1.0 lambda all the time, but all the time can't run a 1.0 lambda.
Yep.
So if you have limited your tuning strategy to always having a 1.0 lambda, then that means you have to be able to decrease boost to continue to support that 1.0 lambda. Or if you have knock, you have to be able to adjust timing aggressively and rapidly and quickly to be able to hold that 1.0. How tuners like us deal with that is we kind of throw the 1.0 lambda requirement out the window, and we will now enrich in to the varying conditions that the motor is operating in, that we want it to operate in, that you want it to operate in. So that means higher boost levels as the combustion chamber heats up and temps go up and EGTs rise. We're able to raise the fuel ratio or go to below a 1.0 lambda to continue to fuel that combustion chamber safely to operate under those new and differing conditions. But if 1.0 lambda is your requirements, then it has a big impact on what you're able to do with the motor. It's the factories do it because, like Nate said, it helps fuel efficiency tremendously, helps emissions, and it's the most efficient point where the least amount of fuel is producing the most energy, the optimal energy. It's that point of equilibrium between the amount of fuel and the energy coming out.
Yeah.
So there's a reason.
It may not. Yeah, it may not be the most powerful mixture, but it is the most. The best balance of emissions for sure.
But if you want to, double the horsepower of that motor, you're not going to be able to hold a 1.0 lambda. Yeah. It's physics don't support it. So we enrich in as much as we can until kind of the fuel system limits, and then we're faced with a similar situation where we have to decide. Our limit isn't 1.0 lambda. Our limit is the fuel system capacity. Right. How much fuel can the injectors in the fuel pump system produce to that combustion chamber? And so once we hit that limit, now we're doing what the factory does. We're lowering boost. We're changing the timing and all the different engine operating parameters to support that limit. But ultimately, that's going to mean, less power, less output to ensure that the safety and longevity of the motor is maintained.
Yeah, it's one of the engineering compromises you have to make. Yeah. The whole world is going to be a selection of what compromises go into the final result.
Yeah. So imagine if you have a walk and you're making some stir fry, and your gas stove can only produce a certain amount of heat coming out of that burner, and then your overall burner could just run out of energy too if you use too much all at once. So you'd have to make some really careful choices with how much heat you use. You're not just going to use way too much heat, waste a bunch of energy, and then have to turn it way down because you overshot, right? So you're just gonna have to get much more accurate and thread that needle, and that's what the factories are doing, and that's the engineering compromise, is making the most of the resource you have.